Okay, well, welcome to another improv for the month. And this one I'm calling Making Fills Fit. Making Fills Fit. So here's the official intro. Adding unwritten pickup notes, fills, and afterthoughts are favorite go-to techniques used by experienced improvisers to personalize a melody. The challenge for newbies is making those extra notes fit in the available space between melodic phrases while keeping the beat. Hi, I'm Bradley Sowash, and in this session, you will learn strategies for adding notes between the notes while still getting to the target notes on time. Let's start with some music. All right, well, getting back to the point here, why am I playing Auld Lang Syne on a hot summer day? It's to demonstrate what we're going to be talking about today, which is that we are going to be adding fills in between the melody notes. How do you do that? So we're going to hit this in three parts here. I'm going to start by defining a few terms. Then I'm going to show you some practice strategies to do that. And then I'm going to leave you with some takeaway tips. So this all starts because I have a long-term participant in my live online jazz piano classes who sent me an email that read as follows. I have a 12-year-old student currently working on an embellishing assignment with the folk song Auld Lang Syne. She emailed me this afternoon saying, I'm having trouble landing on time with my target notes. Can you help me? I have some ideas on how to tackle this at our next lesson, but I would love to hear your thoughts. And that got me thinking. I answered her question in our very next online jazz piano class, but I wanted to go further with it. So let's start with some definitions about what we're talking here. Target notes. Target notes are they're hard to define, but they're the main note that a melody points to. Sort of the resolution note, but sometimes they can be the beginning note. It's a little bit subjective. It's basically the note you're aiming for. So for example, if we take Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we could call that second note a target note. Or we could say a more important target note's a little bit later. So it's like a resolution, a landing point. It's usually a chord tone. It's usually on a downbeat. And we're thinking about how to connect those target notes. Sometimes a target note is just two notes in a melody that you're hooking together. So it's kind of just something you can decide. What are my target notes and how do I want to connect them? So pickups, we know what pickups are. They're the notes before the first note of a phrase. So you can think about like What a Wonderful World. So it has those pickup notes. Or Autumn Leaves, it has a famous set of pickup notes right there. The whole song exploits those pickup notes, the notes sort of before the note. And bluegrass music has that, a lot of the fiddles kick off a tune with pickup notes. The reason it's worth mentioning here is that improvisers often add pickup notes. They play a little fill before the tune starts. So for example, if I were going to play Auld Lang Syne with a made-up fill, I might go do-da-da-do-da, something like that. And then the third of four definitions is fills. And these are the main bread and butter of embellishing a melody. This is the notes between the notes between the notes that are in the melody, or sometimes between the notes in a longer fill between a melodic phrase. So an example of a longer phrase like that might be Paul McCartney's Blackbird. All this space, right? So what would we do there? hand fill. And I'm not going to break down what those were, but I just filled in with some improvised licks. That's what I mean by a fill. Another one appropriate for this weather, summertime. Right here. Okay, so we have to get that fill to fit in the time, particularly if it's not so free as I just played it. Fill. And I got back to the do-bo-dee, the pickups to the second phrase after my improv. That's what we're struggling with here. The last definition I just call afterthoughts. They're like dribbling on past the point. They could also be thought of as tags if they're at the end of a tune. So, for example, that's that little tag of do do da, the little extra thing, or St. Louis Blues. So was that a fill before the next phrase, or was it a tag to the first phrase? It doesn't matter that much. We don't want to get pedantical. We just want to think about that we can sometimes play extra notes before a melodic line. We can play it in the middle of a melodic line, connecting notes, or we can play it at the end of a melodic line, which I call an afterthought. By the way, I know you're going to ask me about the blues, how you could play blues like that, So I'll just mention I do have a couple of resources, learning and teaching the blues, designed for the player and the teacher to work together. And there's a pre-recorded course, a 4-class summer class that is now available on my website that you can learn more about blues there if you're interested. So let's take a look at some ways these definitions can come up and the problems that they might cause. And then I'll check in with some comments and see what you're thinking about so you can write those down. Let's take a simple tune like Twinkle. So we already decided that the target notes, in this case, I'll pick the distance between C and G, which is a great place for a fill because it's a big gap. It's harder to squeeze fills into notes that are close together, and pretty much on a piano, impossible when they're actually adjacent notes, like half-step notes. So, if we want to just add some fills in there, we might go C, C, D, F, G. So what was that? I connected target notes with a fill. And the problem is getting there on time. So before this is instinctive, somebody might do like, oh, I didn't make it to. You got to get to there. You have this much space. Here's the whole fill it. Oh, I went past it. You see that for a newbie, it's sometimes hard to figure out how many notes to put between the target notes. And that's what we're looking at. This is what we're trying to work on. For pickup notes, how long is that pickup going to be? And are we going to get to that C on time? Well, that wasn't a very good pickup because where's the beat? Where was the, how did that fill? And for afterthoughts, it's the same thing. Let's see, I'll go ahead and do a fill. And I got to get back, right? I got to get back. This is the problem that we're looking at today. So if you're just joining us, I'm Bradley Sowash, and we're talking about how to make fills fit. And if you want to get more improv tips like this in the future, you might subscribe to my YouTube channel. Everybody says that, so it must be important. Anyway, let me check in with my visitors here. I'm so glad the piano's coming through now, and thank you for your patience as I worked with that. So welcome Paulette and Susan Staples Bell, a wonderful composer and arranger of educational material, and Alice, I believe are you up in Canada? I believe, Alice, I can't remember. Priscilla, long-term student. Jeanette, a current and long-term student. Tanya, my Yeah, Harold, thank you for being here, for making your comments. I really like teaching to real people here. Rachel, let's see, can ostinato phrase treated as fills? Can I? Okay, so repetitive phrases, ostinatos tend to be, repetitive. I'm thinking of like Pachelbel's canon. So the actual ostinato is usually not a fill. It's more like added notes, improvised notes that we've been doing ever since at least the Romantic era on piano. Let's hear some Latin jazz fills. She says, "All right, let's just try that." So end of the phrase. So I made it to my target. Dee da da. So thanks for that fun suggestion. I love the participation. So moving on to part two, here are some practice strategies you can use to develop an instinct for hitting those fills, because the art of it is really finding the number of notes that get you from one target to the next, and that's what we want to try to break down. So I'm going to give you two general approaches and break those down a little bit. One is to vary the target note intervals, and the other is to time warp your scales. Let's see what I mean by that. Let's say that we're going to play just a simple idea, not even a tune. And to give it a basis, to give it a sense of time, I'm going to ask you to, if you're at your piano, to play C, E, F, G, C, E, F, G. And if you're comfortable, you can play C notes and your thumb between each of those. C, C, E, C, F, C, G, C. If you put your fourth finger on the E, your ring finger on the E, it means you don't have to reset your hands. So the fingering on the bottom of the hand is 5, 4, 3, 2. So that just provides a nice basis that you can see if your fills are fitting over, something like that. I'm not sure that was the greatest grammar in the world. By the way, both those bass lines are used by That's Jazz. Books 1 and 2. Swing Out in book 1 uses the simple version, and in book 2 the tune is Get Up, Get Ready. So you might recognize if you're fans of the That's Jazz series. So under the category of varying target note intervals, which is kind of academic sounding, we're going to think about expanding the range between target notes. So we're going to arbitrarily say that we have a C going to an E like this. C, E. So those are my target notes. And now just ask yourself, how could I fill between those notes? It's pretty easy. There's really only one obvious answer. C, D, E, right? No problem. So you just improvise the note D between C and E. So let's just make this a little bit more interesting. We're going to go from C to G. I'm skipping the F because it clashes with the bass line a little bit, which is like Twinkle, Twinkle, right? So fill that in on your own. Da, fill, bow. C, fill. So here's the what I think obvious solution, right? But you don't have to do it so regularly. You could hold back and then catch up, or you can start early. So you can play with the time inside of the fill, knowing that you just want to arrive on time. It doesn't always have to come out metrically. In fact, it becomes less and less easy to make it metric if we make the intervals to be odd distances. So let's go from C to A, a little less, divided easily into fours. So how would we connect this? C to A. Okay, so how are you going to solve it? I'll try it this way. I really zoomed up there, or sped up on the end, or I started fast and slowed down, just using all the white keys and keeping it real simple in the key right now. Now let's do it to a, let's make it go to a C to C, a whole octave. Okay, that's what we're gonna fill. You don't want to get there early. We spoiled the fun of arriving on the beat. That was not great, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. That target note wants to line up with the E in your bass. Not this. See, that didn't do it. And likewise, we can't be late. And now I was in between the E and the F in the left hand. I want the target to be where it needs to go. And I'm practicing here, just using white keys, feeling the distance between these, but with a steady beat. That's what this is doing. Let's try it to C all the way up to D, an octave plus D, the ninth, if you will. Okay, now not every fill has to use every note. So maybe at some point we start to put a skip in there. Perhaps I start C, E. Let's go clear up to C to high E. Notice that the farther we get, the less important the in-between notes are. They're just on-the-way notes. They aren't really, if they were written down, they wouldn't be as critical as the target notes, I guess. Okay, so now let's try that again, but this time we're going to squeeze in non-diatonic, meaning out of the key. In this case, since we're in the key of C, that will be black notes. So using some black, I should say keys, not notes, black keys, we're going to try to then add those. Let's just start with C to G. So C to G, C, G. Now you just do a fill on that incorporates at least one black key. Okay, so I'm going to incorporate an E flat because I like that blue note. Lots of ways to time that. That was a little early. Okay, now having done that, let's go ahead and put another black key in. I'm going to add an F sharp. Let's see what happens. That was. The main thing is to get that target note right where you want it. Let's use every darn note we can. Chromatic. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, and still arrive on time. That's what we're filling. I was almost early there. So, there it was. So now we're instead of expanding the interval range, we are adding a number of available notes between the intervals. Either way, it has to do with thinking about where that target's going to be and feeling it ahead of time and practicing all the various ways we can hook that so that when we hit it in a tune, we've already been through many of the options. Maybe for some of you, a light bulb's going off. Oh my gosh, I could use some black keys or non-diatonic notes in there. So let me just do a quick check-in here. Diana, a long-term student and kind of a friend and fan, she writes about the Christmas books from That's Jazz. Thank you for mentioning that. Those are fun. So the second half of my second part of the session, and we're end here pretty soon, is to think about time warping your scales. I have a friend, George Litterst, who has time warp technologies. He's invented all kinds of cool music tools like Classroom Maestro and all kinds of things that use MIDI. And he told me that the idea for his company name was the way music breathes when people play it well, when especially romantic music has a breath to it. It kind of has that rubato thing. It warps the time over a steady beat. And so using that same idea, we're going to time warp some scales. So just play from C to C over one octave. So we're just going to get rid of the bass line, and we're going to just do that. But let's get there. I'll just put down a beat here. So right there was. Now I want you to start slow and speed up in the end. Okay, and And now start fast and slow down in the end. We don't really even matter at this point about hitting the beat exactly. What we want is just feeling the idea of not being so regular in our scales. So starting, I forget what I did. Start slow to fast. Now start fast to slow. Okay, let's make this a little bit more interesting and do it 1.5 octaves from C to G. Okay, so start slow and speed up. We aren't worrying about time right now. We're just worrying about being able to warp a scale. Okay, that was slow to fast. Let's go fast to slow. Okay, now let's do a whole C to C over 2 octaves, starting slow to fast. Try to make it an even speeding up, starting slow, speeding. Yeah! Let's do it backwards, starting slow and speeding up. Okay, and now let's start fast and slow it down. And the same thing backwards, starting fast, slowing it down. Try to make even, just like a crescendo mark or whatever, just everything linearly slowing or speeding. Now, the value of this is that sometimes we just have to squeeze in those notes at the last second. So we're able to speed up the number of notes we're playing in a given space and still arrive on time. And we're practicing that by being able to move off the meter, off the regularity of how we usually practice scales. Likewise, sometimes we're almost about to get to a target too fast, and we have to pull back at the last minute. So this just practices that by warping the scales. So let me demonstrate some examples of where this comes up in classical music. I was just looking at some Chopin this morning, and we know this waltz, this D flat waltz, and he does a curious little thing here. Let's set it up here. Here it is. What the heck was that? So that was 13 notes in 2 beats, and it's chromatic. And how does he do that? And how did he struggle with writing that down? Now, you could spend all day doing the math on this and say, well, how do I fit 13 notes in 2 beats? Or you could just feel where that target note ends on the last beat. So just check this out, the beat 3. That's the distance we have to cover, A to G flat in this case. 1, 2, 3. And so you just get there. You just smear it there. You may have to play it fast going to slow, or fast, slow going to fast, or maybe it comes out even. You just got to get there by beat 3. Let's see. That note, that arrival is what makes it work. And if you smear your way there, that's fine, right? Because he had the same trouble. If I put 13 notes in here, how am I going to write this? I'm sure he just tossed it off when he was improvising. So, let's see. What else do I want to say here? We're gonna we've looked at some definitions of what is some words like target notes and pickups and afterthoughts for fills. We've looked at 2 practice strategies. One is to vary the target note intervals, the spaces between it, just breaking this down as an exercise. And the other is to practice scales occasionally that move forward and backward. And the third part I want to do is talk to you about just some takeaway tips that are real short. Let me check in with my buddies here one more time. I was going to say this would be excellent for all of the crazy 23/4 type stuff Chopin does. Yeah, she called it, Lauren Brinkman called it. Yeah, when you see this stuff written, it's just like, what? This is nuts. How am I going to get all those notes in there? But if you realize it's just a connection of target to target. I read Chopin's keys were thinner, so easier to do those runs, says Paulette. Oh, maybe thinner, longer fingers would be useful too. I'm a little late for Western Pennsylvania. Thanks for dropping in, Mary. You missed troubles in the beginning, so I think you were lucky. There's a new keyboard coming out with narrow keys. Okay, so anyway, let's break this up down to let's wrap this up with some takeaway tips. So just leaving you with some ideas about what you can think about on the fly when you want to connect up notes. Number one, memorize your tune so that the target notes, you know where they are, I guess. So you aren't reading and trying to get to them. So if I just play that little lick there, and here I'm opening music telling you how you should memorize. But so at the end of that Chopin lick, I wrote actually in my score here that it's a D flat 7. I just so that I'd see that. But you see, here's the trouble. Right, if I have to read that, I can't get there. So you have to know what it is. I also look at my hands during that, which is tip number 2. Watch your hands, not the music, to see what's available, particularly when you're improvising between target notes. So it helps me to just look down there, right, to see to see that, kind of gauge the distance that I'm filling in there. Improvised fill. So number 1, memorize the tune. Number 2, watch your hands to see what's available. So suppose we're playing. I'm seeing that distance between C and G. There's a story about Dizzy Gillespie, the great jazz trumpet player. You may remember him with the big cheeks. He played using his cheeks to create back tension on his trumpet. And he was able to judge the time from the crosswalks where he lived in New York City, that he could take a step right out into the street right as the stop light turned from don't walk to walk. And the reason he could do that right to the second was, having walked that every day, he was feeling it musically. He was able to bring up the tempo. He felt like, okay, that's 16 measures at this tempo, and then at beat 1, he'd step into the road. Amazing reporters who were talking to him as he demonstrated his sense of time. So that is about knowing where the target notes lie before you get to them. He was feeling the target note, in this case a walk sign, a long time before it came up. So number 3, a good tip: pre-decide the target notes when you're improvising. So melodies are already clear. We have Twinkle Twinkle. But if we're improvising, and I could just decide that I want to play, let's see, I'll take a A minor, B minor 7, flat 5, E7. And I'm going to arbitrarily decide that I'm going to have a target note of C, F, and G sharp. So back to that Latin thing. So I pre-decided this while in my noodling process to get ready for the gig, let's say. So C, F, G sharp. So now I already know what those are. I'm not now having to just smear this with notes. And all I have to do is connect my pre-decided notes. So it's okay when you're improvising to have some pre-decisions. I didn't set how I was going to connect those, but I knew what those were, the targets. Okay, so the other thing to do is just compose this for a while. Compose some fill notes to a standard or a tune you're working on in the noodling process, and say, I like the way this connects. Maybe you just say C, D, E, F, and you pick that and you composed it. That composing and improvising aren't very different. Composing just gives you a little bit more time to think about it. And the number 5 is that it's okay to play the target notes sometimes. So let's say we're playing Auld Lang Syne. So if that note were a little late, sometimes you can kind of put it in a little late, and is it late or is it a cool rhythmic alteration that you improvised. So just a little tweak there. If you keep the beat and you smile and you're a little late on your target, just make a bigger deal out of it. Like, I decided to hold that note back and put a few extra notes in between. By the way, I'll be hosting a fall online jazz class called Standards and Styles. It starts September 8th, in which we dive into a lot of these creative strategies in more detail. It's okay to play the target notes sometimes. Yeah, chord tones make good target notes for improvising. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing. And then, in fact, I'll be specific. If you're playing jazz, thirds and sevenths are wonderful target notes. They're sometimes called guide tones or identity tones. So watch your hands, not the music, to see what's available between target notes. Yeah, she's writing them down. Thank you for that, catching those, Tanya. So I need to wrap this up. But what I would like to say is that if you do any of these things, there's a lot of ideas here, but you also look for opportunities to apply it by just playing a nursery rhyme, a Christmas song, it's standard. And you put these, so both exercising them a little bit, but then loosening them in a tune. I can pretty much promise that what is right now perhaps initially cerebral will turn into an instinct. It's a process I call moving from cognition to intuition. And it comes from composing, from improvising, and just experiencing how you're going to connect your targets. What I mean by targets, just to say something else about that, when you see written music, I like to say this: there's the same amount of ink on each note head, but not every note head is equally important. So as musicians, we have to divide out, like, what are the key important notes and what are the on the way notes, and that just makes good musicality. I sometimes wish that you could have gray notes that were in between notes and very black notes for the main targets. It would help us interpret when the composer really meant it and when it was just a squiggle kind of on the way. Anyway, so before I close, here's a reminder that you can watch these past improv tips of the month on my YouTube channel where you are now. And then you can, sometimes I turn into blog posts with written musical examples. And so you can see that at my website on my blog. And so I'm just going to jam out a little bit on Auld Lang Syne. And now that you've heard some of these strategies, I want you to maybe, if you need to go, that's fine, but you might enjoy listening how I hook those together. Maybe I play this. That was super loaded up. So I'll just try that a little bit more, but I'm going to try to load it up with probably too many fills and connecting notes for good taste. Let's try this. I'll go ahead and do a pickup. Now I improvise. Notice I'm still arriving at target. Back to the melody. This is called making lemonade out of a lemon, if you notice my last chord. All right, until next time, you enjoy your creative music making journey. I'm Bradley Sowash. Bye for now.